Hi, it's Mo, and welcome to Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm joined in this episode by Ron Tite. Ron has his own agency. They've been remarkably successful. They're called Church and State, and he's the author of Think, Do, Say, which was a phenomenal book that I devoured almost entirely in one sitting. And in this episode, we're going to leverage some of the things that we've learned as in my business that I run, Bundle Idea Group, where we've trained almost 20,000 experts all over the world now on sound, efficient, and authentic business development skills. And we're going to sort of mash up some of the things in Snowball System with Think, Do, Say, and a lot of Ron's framework. So I'm really excited about it. In this episode specifically, I'm going to ask him for what's his number one big idea for how we can grow our book of business, grow our relationships, and grow our career. Now, before we get into it, know that if you want our best thinking on those exact three things, growing your book of business, your relationships, and your career, head over to growbigplaybook.com. That's growbigplaybook.com. And that's where you can sign up for a little weekly newsletter that I write myself. Take a couple hours to write a little 700 or 800 word article every single week with a little tip that you can use to take your business development game to the next level. You can sign up in seconds, and that's over at growbigplaybook.com. So here we go. Here's Ron Tite. Hi, everybody. It's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. And I'm excited because I have Ron Tite with me today. Ron does a ton of cool stuff. His book, Think, Do, Say, I just loved. I was actually reading it on a Saturday night, and my wife is like, Are you still reading that book? Like, it's Saturday night. But I'm like, it's small and it's fast and it's chock full of good stuff. So I kept reading it. Anyway, I did put the book down, Ron, because it was time to watch some shows with Becky. But I was so excited to have you on the show. So, Ron, I want to start off this first episode with me and you, and I want to ask you the big question. Ron, what's your big idea for how our audience can grow their book of business, grow their relationships, and grow their career? Go.
Well, the big idea, I mean, I don't know how big I guess you can decide how big it is, but I think that the first thing is to, let's just stop gaming the system. Everybody just stop gaming the system, right? It's just we need to I think there's so many people who are looking for shortcuts to business development. And if you're looking for a shortcut, you'll find one. You will find one. There are a dime a dozen shortcuts, and there will be 10 LinkedIn pitch slaps into your LinkedIn inbox, by tomorrow. We'll promise you all the shortcuts. So put the shortcuts away. And I think there's two things, that I think that people can do. The first thing is to have a consistent, what I would call a brand narrative, and I can get into a little bit more of that, but have a consistent brand narrative to sell the things you have, and then be entrepreneurial so that you can create the thing that other people need. And that might be repackaging of current resources, or it might be a rebranding of certain things. It's not that you need to go out and start a whole new division, but I think there are so many people when they look at business development, they're looking at how do they develop business based on the stuff they already have, opposed to developing business to genuinely want to help people and to serve a need out there. And that requires, I think it requires a bit of an entrepreneurial approach to business development.
Yeah, Ron, this is great. So you just created a framework for this whole episode. Talking with the consistent brand narrative, and I liked all three of those words. Consistent is huge. Knowing who we're for, the brand, and then the narrative, how do we communicate? Just those three words say a lot. And of course, the be entrepreneurial. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of somebody in professional services, just because
Yeah,
everybody can relate to consultants, but maybe you're a lawyer, or maybe you're an account manager at a big service-based company, but
sure.
you're basically advising other people, right? You're
Yeah.
using your big brain. So let's say we'll just use a persona of a consultant that's a partner at a big a consulting firm. How can they what should be the first thing they should do around developing this consistent brand narrative?
The first thing we need to do is look at, and this is not to just speak to the book, right? And I hate when people say that. Well, Mo, as I said in the book, I think it was page 48. You know what page it was on, Um, but I really believe that business development, especially within professional service firms, um, is really bound by purpose. It is defined by actions, and it is adopted by other people by how you communicate it. And so those are the first three things that you need to identify.
Wait,
Bound
go
by
back because that was fast. Do those three again. I want our audience to hear it again. Go slower.
So you need to be bound by purpose, bound by the purpose, by the higher order belief that you have and that your organization has. And that has to go beyond the thing that you sell. And so if you're in the data practice of a large consulting firm, we all want to go like, what do we believe? Well, we believe that, data, and we just want to spew the thing out that we sell on a regular basis, or that we do on a daily basis. But we have to believe in something that goes well beyond that. And some would call that personal purpose. Some would call that your why. Some, for the Simon Sinek fans out there. But whatever that higher order belief is, we call it a brand belief. What's your brand belief for you as a person and for your organization? And if you can't articulate that, or nobody in the organization has articulated that, well, you got to kind of start there. So that's being bound by purpose. Secondly, you will be defined by the actions that you take. And so as a profession, as somebody in business development, you are going to be defined by the actions you take to fulfill and live up to that purpose. And living up to that purpose is defined by the actions you take. It's not by the things you say. It's just not. You're defined by the actions you take. And then the third part is, it's not enough. It's just not enough to be bound by purpose and defined by your actions. When we look at if you look at political coup d'etats that fail, a lot of times the reason they fail is because the insurgent forces, the leaders who are at kind of grassroots organizations, who are connected to what the people really, really want, not what the establishment says they want or believes they want, but what they really want. They have that ear to the ground. They are bound by a purpose. And whether that's equality or whether that's better opportunity, whatever it is, they have this great purpose. And they actually live it. These people aren't just paying lip service. They actually live it. And they think that's enough. And what they fail to recognize is that they still need to acquire new people. They need to convince people to come on board, to say, think what we think and do what we do. And they fail to realize that how they communicate, that is where their ideas and their philosophies are adopted by other people. That's where growth comes in, is when other people go, I like what these people believe. I believe in the same thing that they believe in. And man, they're impressive because they're doing it. They have aligned these actions. I want to join them. That's all business development is, in my opinion. It's just people going, I like these people. I want to join them. I want to do business with these people.
Ron, this is so good. And I believe so if we break it down into think, do, say framework that's in your book, I can talk about your book more than you can, right? It's really good, folks. So those three things are think, do, say. Is that right? I mean, I know you didn't use the exact words.
Yeah, 100%. Very intentional on the order of those words. And, a lot of people say, like, why isn't it think, say, do? I remember, like, in book launch week, when you do television interviews and stuff. And so I did a television interview, and literally it's like, he's the author of Think, Say, Do. I'm like, it's not the title of the book, actually.
At least get that right. I can live with you not reading an interview here, but get the title right.
That's
Come on,
right.
you don't even have to open it. That's so
on
funny.
national television.
This guy's the author of System Le Snowball or something. I don't even know what it would say.
Yeah.
Well, go deeper, because one of the stories I loved in the book is the REI story. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And the reason it resonates so well with me is because my wife and I and two daughters, man, we are REI fanatics. Like,
amazing.
it's the only store we maybe go to just to go hang out. We're like, if we're anywhere near there, we're like, oh, well, we'll drive over off the expressway and just pop in, and we just want to walk around. Like, it just makes me happy to look at camping gadgets and think about where we're going to go next and things like that. But a lot of people don't know the narrative and the underneath behind the story you shared. So while we're talking about consultants, I think there's maybe something to learn by that story. Could you share that, and we can sort of wrap up this episode with that? And how did they think? How did they say? How do they do?
Yeah, so they are consultants. I think they're consultants. I think they're consultants
Mm,
who have, they're consultants to the outdoor space with a product that, where they really make their revenue. But they
you're
are
right.
consultants.
You are. And when you walk in there, people start asking you questions. How can I help? They guide
Yep.
you the right thing. They'll tell you if you should buy the less expensive Gore-Tex jacket because you don't need all the bells and whistles. They really are
Yep.
advisors. Yeah,
Yeah,
so keep
exactly.
going. This is good.
So whereas most retailers would say, we want to be the best outdoor retailer and we sell this and we sell this and we sell this. That's the way most people would go. And we got a liquidation sale on Friday. They are bound by purpose. And the purpose is fundamentally, it is, in their words, we believe that a life lived outside is a life well lived. And so they have that goes beyond the thing they sell. Now, what's really important with it though is it is strategically relevant to the thing they sell. And far too many people, when they talk about purpose, they start going down some philanthropic social issue rabbit hole where it's like, we believe that gender equality should, like, blah blah blah, and like, well, I hope so. I hope you believe that gender equality should exist in the workforce, but that's not purpose, because that is not tied to the thing that you sell. So they have a purpose that is strategically aligned to where they make their money. So we believe a life lived outside is a life well lived. Well, what do they do to reinforce that value and that belief? Well, yes, you can say they inspire and inform and equip people so that they can enjoy and live a life outside. So that's what I would call their essential do. They inspire, inform, and equip people with the proper tools so that they can get a greater enjoyment out of the great outdoors. So that's what they do. But they also go beyond that. So that's what they currently, what else could you do to reinforce this? Well, they close their store on Black Fridays. And they close it because this, in their words, would rather be in the mountaintops than in the aisles, and like putting up with that freak show that exists for a Black Friday sale, which is not fun for anybody, especially the people working in retail. And so they closed their store on Black Friday, and to the doubters, they did it and they grew, revenue 9 points year over year. So, they and then they have a series of other initiatives and programs that reinforce that a life lived outside is a life well lived. So that's what they think. That's what they do. Well, how do they talk about it? Well, they talk about it in a really authentic way. And the launch spot for that initiative of closing the store on Black Friday, which wasn't, by the way, a Q3 sales thing or Q4 sales thing. It was like, no, this is a fundamental part of the organization. And it still continues today. But the way they talk and their communications are really authentic. They're to use a tagline from somebody up here, that, they're big enough to deliver, but they're small enough to care. That you have all the trust in the world that they have the best advice and that they have the best products, but they're small enough to care, that they don't talk like somebody, like a brand that is so far removed from the reality of the street that you think, oh, they lost their connection so long ago. They're too polished and they're too scripted now. So when you combine all of those three things together, what they think, being bound by that purpose, fundamentally living up to that purpose through their actions and how they're defined, and then talking about it in just a really interesting way. You talk about business development, they've set themselves up to close many, many deals.
Yeah, Ron, this is so rich. And so um, let's put a bow on this. We've got so much more to cover in our future episodes. I don't want to, I could just keep going on this.
Yeah.
So everybody, if you like this, you're going to love Ron's next answer, because I'm going to ask him, how can we create and close more opportunities? How can we deepen relationships? Will be the episode after that. How do we hack our habits to stay on top of this think, do, say model, even when we're busy? But Ron, give us one last tidbit on this. So now we're back in the shoes of that professional. Maybe
Yeah.
they're a consultant, another professional service, account manager, big service-based company, whatever. But what would be your first step to map that out? So now folks, they're at the point, they understand the think, they understand the do, they understand the say. The ARIA example is so poignant. What would they do to map that out for them as a personal brand, if you will?
Yeah, well, even for the brand narrative, which kind of flows out of that think, do, say thinking, right? Once you've got those three things, and that typically requires some other people to get involved, right? And say like, senior management who agree with that. If you're not doing your personal brand, if your personal brand, it can be totally on you. The brand narrative flows out of that. And this is your consistent narrative that you can use from everything from speeches and webinars to about us, copy on your website to whatever. So it's these 5 things. 1, what's going on in the world through your lens. Just what's going on in the world through your lens. And I'll give you an example of a full brand narrative in a second. What's going on in the world through your lens. Secondly, that all creates a problem. What problem does it create? Thirdly, what do you believe about that problem? Fourth, how do you solve that problem? And 5, why should I believe you? I get pitch slapped all the time. Why should I believe you? So, as an example, I own an agency called Church and State. Okay, and you can, if you understand advertising and marketing, you probably understand what we kind of, it's normally the separation of church and state. We believe in the unification of church and state. But for every pitch, this is what we go through. 1, what's going on in the world? People are being bombarded by advertising messages from all angles, from all places, in every second of their day. They have no idea what's content, what's advertising, and what the difference between the two is. There are new models coming up for disruptive business models where they're not exactly sure where that company makes their money and how they're, because it's a complete disruption of the existing ecosystem. All that is going on in the world. Okay, what problem does that create? The problem it creates is that the average consumer, they don't know where to look and they don't know who to trust. They really don't. They don't know where to look and they don't know who to trust. Okay, what do we believe about that problem? See, we believe that people actually, they used to vote with their wallets, but now they vote with their time. Oh, okay. How do we solve that problem? We create communications that are so compelling and so relevant and so valuable that they help brands and media organizations win that battle for time. Oh, okay. Why should you believe us? Well, you should believe us because our clients are Walmart and DoorDash and Microsoft, and we have some smaller organizations, and we have a bevy of professional people from a wide variety of backgrounds, and we have a proven process, and here's the data, and here's the testimonials, and all that kind of stuff. So I've walked you through those 5, a narrative that doesn't start, by the way, with, oh, by the way, this is what we do, and this is how we can solve your problem. It starts with what's going on in the world. And the second, why you start there is because that starts the head nods. People go, yeah, you're right. That is going on in the world through our lens. That is going on in the world through law. That is going on in the world through, staffing and recruitment. Now, you start with a nod and then you go, this creates a problem. And they go, oh, you're right. I haven't seen the problem articulated that way before. That's right. Well, we actually have a fundamental belief about that problem, which is your brand belief. Here's how we solve that problem. Here's the do. And here's why you should believe us. That's the say. This is how we talk about it. And again, I'm not selling something that somebody, I'm not trying to create a dialogue that isn't true. I'm not trying to sell anybody. I'm just trying to frame the conversation for where we add the most amount of value. And if somebody says, I don't think that's a problem, then we're not going to connect on this opportunity, because that's what drives our process. That's what drives our thinking. And if you don't have that problem, amazing, good for you. I'm going to hook you up with somebody who can solve the problem you think you have, because it's clearly not us.
Oh, Ron, it was great. And I love how you broke it down to those 5 things. So, okay, so folks are going to want more of you, maybe Church and State, maybe the book. Where should they go to get more, Ron?
They can go to rontite.com, and there's everything there on the book and the agency and everything else. Everything else they could ever want. Or they can Google.
I love it. Well, Ron, thanks for being on the show. Everybody, if you like this, which I did, and so we're just scratching the surface, my friends, the next episode, I'm going to ask Ron, how can we use the Think, Do, Say framework to create and close more opportunities? Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Mo.
Hey, everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. This is the second episode where I'm interviewing Ron Type. Ron owns an agency called Church and State. His book is fantastic. I devoured it the first day it came to my doorstep. It's called Think, Do, Say. Ron, the question today is how can our audience get better at creating and closing more of the meaty work that they want to do?
It's such a great question because, and I love that that you didn't say like, how can they, develop more business? Because I think the meaty work that they want to do, because that man, that's where margin, right? It's you've done it enough that your process is really sound. You really know what you're talking about. You've got tons of experience, and so you can do it in a faster amount of time. So your margins are greater. You're adding more value when it's meaty work you want to do. And I think that is the first step, which is like identify what is the stuff that you want to do, and what is the stuff that you as a person wants to do. And really, at the end of the day, we should all just be happy and fulfilled, shouldn't we? I mean, really. And I just had somebody who resigned from the agency. And the reason they resigned was because I prompted them and said, I just want you to be happy and fulfilled. And you just I haven't felt like you've been happy and fulfilled lately. And if you can be here, amazing. We have all these opportunities for you. But if it's not, then you got to tell me, and I will help you find the opportunity, the meaty opportunity for you. And I said, take the weekend. And she came back and said, you know what? I want to do my own personal art. You're right. Until you told me, I didn't realize I really wasn't happy and fulfilled for this past year. So I think that's a great place to start. I think that what you need to do is that you need to put yourself in a position to close. And I think you need to build the organization that people want to work with. There's no better way than to create those meaty opportunities than to be the organization that other people want to work with. And from there, it just becomes aligning the opportunity with what you have to offer and being sure that you clearly communicate where you add the best value over and over and over again. We're doing a rebrand right now of a suicide prevention organization. And I can't name it, but so we're completely rebranding that. And when you look, like when you really think about it in those terms, when it's suicide prevention, you don't want the people calling saying, I don't like my job. Like this is a really high octane, really specific service. And you really want the people who can best use the service, who are in a position to gain the most value from that service. And that might be a bit harsh in terms of an example for most of us in business, but we should kind of operate in that way. Like who are the really specific people who can best use our service, and how do we go and put ourselves in a position to win when those people realize that they need our service.
So I like this. Let's go. I want to build on something you said in the last episode because I think this is
Sure.
going to be really meaningful to our audience, and it flows right from what you were just talking about. You've got your Think, Do, Say framework, which folks,
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't hear that whole thing, go back and listen to the last episode. Really good. The say part of the program is sort of how do you get the word out? How do you tell people about what you do? How do you magnetically attract people to you because of the press you're getting, because of word of mouth, all kinds of other things? So Ron, if I'm let's say the person we're talking about is thinking about their personal brand for whatever reason. They're trying to get more awareness around the personal brand so they can grow their career, so they can get people asking them about what they do. Say
Mm-hmm.
they're a lawyer. What do they do to really to gain awareness? If they know who they're for, well, anyway, you just go roll with that.
Yeah.
You're going to be good.
Yeah, so the say part, and you're right, and you can break it down from what do you say, and where do you say it, and how do you say it, and when do you say it? There's actually a model that I've adapted, but the model comes from a guy named Todd Lowe Henry. So his model. He taught it to me, and then I adapted it for kind of my world. And it's called the 4 C's. So the 4 C's are consumption, curation, creation, and connection.
Say that
Now,
again.
so the first one is consumption.
Yep.
So once you've got that brand belief, you know fundamentally what your higher purpose is and you know what you're here for, you need to operationalize the strategic consumption of media that supports that. And it's other people, it is articles, and it is magazines, and it is blog posts, and it is listening to podcasts and all that. So how do you operationalize, meaning how do you efficiently consume media that makes you smarter, that makes you better? And so personally, I use Feedly. It's an RSS feed. It's an old school kind of thing. It's an RSS,
Yep, me too.
yeah, right. So you can go through and you go like, not relevant, not relevant. Oh yeah, this headline is, I really got to read this. Okay. And you can't just do this all day, every day. You have other stuff to do. So you need to operationalize an efficient way of consuming it. Second C is curation. What curation does is I curate it 3 ways. The first way is I curate that out to, let's say, my community. And over time, people have gone, I like the way this guy thinks. They're in my community. And that might sound wanky, but you know what I mean. People who follow and whatever. So I curate that out because I think this is really important. And this may even be from another agency.
Yeah.
And I go, I don't care. I didn't write this, but you need to read this. But I also editorialize it. So I go, this is a summary. This is a key line. This is a key data point. I disagree with this, but I love this. Whatever it is, I editorialize it. Okay. So that's the curation, part A of curation. Part B of curation is, like you, Mo, I do a ton of speaking. I do, in non-pandemic times, I do probably between 70 and 75 keynotes a year. Now, one cannot do that many speeches and get up every night and go, let's see what speech I'm going to do tomorrow. I need to operationalize it. I also don't want to deliver the exact same speech every time. So the second part of that curation is I take that and I have a bunch of buckets. I've got probably 30 buckets. Within Think might be, purpose might be 1 bucket. And there's 70 slides in there because I've read an article and I go, okay, I'm going to design the slide right now of what I'm going to talk about when I reference this key insight that I thought was important. I design the slide right then. I take my editorialized notes and the resource, the source of the article, and I put it right into the speaker notes in the slide, and it goes into the whatever bucket. It's the storytelling bucket, the authenticity bucket, whatever. So that when I go to write a speech or when I go to do a presentation to a financial services organization, it's there. I'm not trying to create this thing, which takes so much time to do that. You can't do it the night before and be good. You can't do it the week before a big presentation for a big opportunity and be good. Chris Rock does not take a week to write an HBO or Netflix comedy special. He tours it for a year. And then when the big moment hits, he's got it. It's good to go. So that's the second part of curation. The third part of curation is I take those exact same things and I move it into a tool called Scrivener. Scrivener is where I write my books. I'm always writing the next pitch and the next speech, and I'm always writing the next book every single week, even though I don't even know what the next book is yet. I'm just putting it to buckets and I'm putting my editorialized notes. So that's the curation side. The third C is creation. At some point, I got to create my own stuff. I got to do my own white paper. I got to do my own post. I got to do my own podcast. Whatever it is, I need to create my own stuff and get that out to the world. The fourth C is then connection. So, and I can show you screen grabs. I literally follow this every single week. When I've put something, let's say into LinkedIn, for me, that's the platform of choice. I've put this, you got to read this article because I think this is really important. The connection part is if somebody goes, I'm calling BS, or not in a telco industry that doesn't work that way, or I love this, and here's another example. This is such an amazing place to be because people are challenging your thinking where you can double down and say, nope, I've got the data to prove it. I fundamentally believe what I wrote. They're challenging your thinking and you go, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Or I didn't have experience in a law firm. Man, a partner-led environment, that's a completely different thing. And so the next time I go to do a speech or the next time I go to do a business development presentation in a pitch, because I've had that perspective, I can go, now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking not in a law firm. There's no way. And here's how we would adapt, because I already dealt with that 8 weeks ago. And it also allows you to showcase your personality as to how do you deal with conflict. When somebody says, I'm calling BS on this, if you go, oh, you know what, that's really cool. If you then get angry and people are like, I don't want to, that's where your personality shows. It's not in the post, it's in the comments. And that's where people go, I wanted to do business with this person. When you accumulate all those 4 C's together, you put yourself into a position, somebody who goes, this person, or this organization, I like the way they think. And I tell you, the amount of business development we get from people simply reaching out on LinkedIn, and a lot of them aren't appropriate for us. It's either not a big enough budget or it's not really in our sweet spot, but they're clamoring to say, I want to do business with you guys so much that it's actually changed how, because I'm the face of it, that we have to actually protect and go like, well, it's more than Ron, right? Like it's not just me, that there's a team of other people here. So it's a really long-winded answer to a great question.
No, Ron, it's great. I love the consumption, the curation, the creation, and the connection, and it was the examples that I think really made it come to life. So there's more here, but I want to save it for the next episode because we've got so much good content, folks, coming your way. So, Ron, where should people go if they want more of you? And of course, there's more people behind it than you, Ron, at Church and State. Where should they go to learn more about you and the entire team at Church and State?
You can go to rontite.com or you can go to churchstate.com. And remember, we are not a spiritual organization. People hear that.
But oh, I couldn't think of the word. There's a word there that was close to spiritual, but you're like an ambassador for
We are
brand or
led by
something
a
like
higher
that.
power. That is
Oh, okay.
a purpose of better advertising and marketing. Yeah.
I love it. Well, everybody head over to rontide.com or churchstate.com. Is that right? There's no
That's right.
and in there. Yeah, churchstate.com. And honestly, the book Think, Do, Say is so good. Like Ron's given us the live version now, everybody. But check out the book because it's power packed. Ron, thanks for being on the show, and everybody. In the next episode, I'm going to ask Ron, how can we use all of his frameworks to deepen relationships? Thanks, Ron.
Thanks, Mo. And thanks for everybody for listening.
Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue, and I'm with Ron Tite. And I love all this alliteration, Ron. It's amazing. It's like we planned it. Say thanks to your parents for naming you Ron. It's working out great for us. But in the last couple episodes, Ron he dropped some serious knowledge about how to think about your brand, your personal brand, your company's brand, your practice brand, your product brand. This Think, Do, Say framework is magic. And he covered that in the last couple episodes. And we went really deep last time about how to create and close more opportunities. Ron, I thought your 4-step framework was awesome. In this episode, folks, Ron, I want you to share everything you got in your big brain. How can our audience deepen relationships and win the relationship advantage?
Well, that's a great question. What I love about it is to focus on the relationship, right? Know that if you have great relationships, enough of those relationships will convert, to use the funnel, kind of language. They will convert. That's not why you do them. That's not why you invest in relationships. Just know that enough of them will, and that should be enough. When I started my agency, I started and I ran into a client that was a client of mine, I think 15 years before. She used to be my old client at Dell when I was the creative director on Dell. And she said, I hear you started your own agency. And I said, yeah. And she said, who are your clients? And I said, I don't have any. I just started and I'm figuring it all out. And she said, I'll give you a project. I said, what? She goes, yeah, I'll give you a project. Let me figure something out. She helped launch my agency. And she didn't have a need, but she created a project. And why? Because of the relationship that I built 15 years before starting my own agency. Now, far too many people think when they start talking about relationships, they get in this panic of, I got to start building relationships because I got to grow the business. And so what that says to me is, oh, so you're only in relationships for the business side. So you don't actually care about the genuine human being who's there. You actually it's just, you want to have relationships with people that pay you. We can smell that a mile away. So what can you do to build relationships? I think is that you can have a genuine desire to have a connection with another human being. You can have a genuine desire to want to help to somebody. You have a genuine desire to be authentic. And authenticity it's a $2 word, I think. But I think authenticity to me just means being comfortable with your imperfections. And because if you show up looking and acting and sounding like the stock photo version of a lawyer, of a consultant, of a marketer, of a salesperson, of a BD professional, I'm not buying it. I'm just not. I mean, I can smell that stuff a mile away. Mo, I had a great engagement in Sarasota, Florida, and it was with 100 CEOs. It was ridiculous. It was like the 100. Like, all the organizations. No handlers were allowed in the room. Like it was, I couldn't tweet out where I was because security was through the roof. It was just the room presenting to the room, basically. And I met this chairman of a global software company. And I met with this group about authenticity at the C-suite and C-levels. And I met this guy who's from the Deep South. He had a deep Southern accent. And he told me, he said, I used to be a VP at a CPG, at a consumer packaged goods company. When I hit VP, they sent me on a leadership development course. And he said, I soon realized that the sole purpose of the leadership development course was to get me to lose my Southern accent because they didn't feel it would give me credibility on the global stage. And then he goes, so I quit. Because I realized my voice, it ain't a bug, it's a feature. And he's right. Are those imperfections, they're not bugs, they're features. And that's what people buy. We talked in one of the earlier episodes of, people don't know where to look and they don't know who to trust. And so if you come at me as the stock photo version of what you think a BD professional is supposed to look and act and sound like, I'm already in a position of not knowing who to trust. My gut reaction is, if you're hiding the real you from me, what else are you hiding? That's not a way to start a business relationship, in my opinion.
Well, this is fun, Ron, because I just love it when the show lets me go somewhere that we didn't prep, and we both prepped a lot for this. So I'm going to dig deep on this because I love that story. So let's break it all the way down to an initial meeting. Boy, that really feels like where there's a switch, a fork in the road. Where, boy, after a first half-hour meeting, a little introductory, let's paint the scenario and say somebody that used you before is introducing you to somebody that could use you now. And you're in that first meeting, and boy, this is somebody you'd really love to work with. What's your take? Like, what's your advice to somebody where they feel the pressure? They feel probably the pressure to go too far, maybe to close, if you will, when that's not the point. They definitely definitely feel pressure to impress. So what's your advice to them on how they should act in that first meeting so that they're authentic and there's the highest chance of success?
Great question. So my background, Mo, I don't even know that we talked about my background's in stand-up comedy. So I was stand-up.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
I was a stand-up for 20 years while working in advertising, but a lot of my thinking comes from a stand-up brain, of like, how do you read a room?
Stories like that talking about comics in the book. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and so there's a line in comedy that we use that's called never ignore the reality of the room. So if somebody yells out, "You suck," everybody heard that. Everybody knows what just went down. And you can't ignore it. You can't ignore that reality. You need to call it out. You need to go to the person. So I think when you're in those situations, and it can be the situation that you described, or it can be a situation where you've spilled coffee on yourself and you feel like a moron, or you could be a situation where your slides aren't working. All those things, never ignore the reality of the room. Call it out. Call it out. I've had some of the best meetings was when you start off and it's like they're not buying it. They're just not buying it. And you can feel it that they're not buying it. And you know what I say? This feels like you're not buying this. You're not buying what you're like, okay, let's scrap that. Or, you know what? I remember, a boss of mine went to a pitch. We were a global agency for a client, and we were expected to get the Canadian business. And he went to meet the president of that client. And the client said, before you start, you know what? I'm really happy with my current agency. He looked at him and he goes, good for you. That's amazing. Nobody stands up for their agencies anymore. I'm not going to take any more of your time. That's awesome. And left. He read the reality of the room. And there was no sales pitch in the world that was going to win that meeting. And so he read it and he said, you know what? I'm gone. So in your situation where you said somebody else has introduced me, my gut is to go with a joke first and foremost. So to say, what was Frank thinking of putting us together? She's, boy, pressure's on, man, because I know Frank does a lot of business with you. I can't screw this up because I don't want Frank to feel this, right? And then suddenly people are, their guard is down because they know that you're being completely yourself, and you're gonna read the reality that is the room, and that I think that honesty is really critical. It's being honest about the situation. It's about being honest about the role that your organization plays in the lives of the client on the other end of the table. We have something that we say when we reference Think to Say, and we say every agency has their own BS trademark process. This is ours, right? Because we know every agency has been in. It's this method. It's that method. And we go, yeah. You know what? Everyone's got their own thing. This is ours. We think it's different. We think it's unique, and allow us to explain it.
I love it. I love that idea of starting with a joke. And just as you were talking about, I was having flashbacks of meetings where somebody would call it out, or when a different meeting started with a joke. So your stories are they bring it in. So really cool. And I think you're
Especially,
right.
sorry, Mo,
Yeah,
especially if something a disaster has struck.
yeah.
And so the stand-up in me, I remember going to it was a big pitch, and one of the people on our team, I use the example, he spilled 5 cups of Starbucks coffee in a rotating door. What do you call those doors?
Revolving door? I
Revolving.
don't know. We don't travel anymore. I don't even know what they are.
The
I don't leave
revolving
my
door.
house.
He goes to the revolving door of 5 coffees, right? All over him. And he starts to lose his mind. He can't handle it. And I looked at him and I said, what an opportunity. How many other agencies are going to walk through the door having spilled coffee? None. None. This is a wonderful opportunity to pivot from that to show how real we are. I remember doing a speech in front of 2,000 people, and for the first 15 minutes, my fly was gaping wide open. And I turned around and I see it, and some people would have panicked. And I went and I walked into the front row and I said, has this been down the whole time? And they go, mm-hmm. And I go, you had one job. One job. And if my fly is down, you do a little, you tug your ears, you do it, you do, right? Come on, this is us together, right? And not only did it kind of really diffuse the situation, it made me completely human, but it established what we in comedy call a callback. Because now I've got something to reference later on that says, if you think this is bad, Well, it's not as bad as your fly being down in front of 2,000 people, but it's pretty bad. And now it's this thing that we can always reference. It's that little joke we have between us. And it all happened because my fly was down or you spilled coffee on yourself.
Oh my gosh, I want to go. We're getting tight on time, Ron. We got a
Yeah.
whole nother episode, but I want to ask more about this. Do you have time to stay? I know we're talking
Yeah,
in
yeah.
front of the whole audience now. Okay.
That's all
All
good.
right.
That's
So
all
I
good.
ask you one more question, then we'll wrap this. We'll do our next episode. This is fun, folks. We're getting like bonus Ron Tight here. Um, so I've been curious. I've noticed something just in our wandering into it, that of course the beginnings of meetings are really important and the endings of meetings are really important. Primacy and recency effect is the science, tons behind it. But one of the things I've noticed has been helpful, just stumbling into it, is ending meetings by calling back. I didn't know there was a word for it. Some little joke that happened along the way. Have you found that's powerful?
In comedy, that every great comedy set should do that. A great comedy set should start with a joke or an insight that establishes the thread that goes through the whole thing. And then at the very end, you should revisit that very first joke. Because what that does is it completes the thought, it puts a nice bow on everything. It also to the audience goes, psst, we're done. Right? It's a nice way to end it. And they go, and there's no uncomfortable like, so that's it. Any questions? Like everybody knows that's the end. And that callback, I think, it's just a nice little bow on top that wraps everything up beautifully.
I love it. It's like when the last line of an article ties something back. You didn't see it coming, but it ties back something that was in the beginning or whatever. It's the live version of that. Ron, this is awesome. So, where should people go to get more Ron Tight and Church and State?
rontight.com, churchstate.com.
It's almost like you've thought those through. That's your name.
Or come to Toronto and just wander the streets looking for me.
In revolving doors with lots of coffee and a colleague that's stumbling, and their chest is very warm. All right,
Yeah.
so let's finish up this episode with that. Folks, hey, if you didn't catch the earlier ones, they're awesome. In the next episode, I'm going to ask Ron, how do we hack our habits to do this cool stuff he's been talking about, even when we're really busy? Ron, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Mo.
Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm having a blast with Ron Tight. We've taped 3 episodes before this one. If you haven't caught them, go back, watch, listen, do whatever you do, but devour them. Tons of amazing techniques and stories. In this one, Ron, I want to ask you a simple question, but something hardly anybody does well.
Okay.
How do we as professionals, with one foot in the delivery of services, with one foot in retention and growth, how do we stay on top of the retention and growth activities when everything is yanking us away?
Well, I think there's almost a metaphor, I guess we can use, or that certainly one that I use, and to understand the kind of the perspective in this. So, one, I was born in Montreal, but I grew up for the most part in what I like to call Canada's Flint, Michigan. Which is called Oshawa, Ontario. It was at one point home to the largest General Motors plant in the country. So I grew up like a mile down the road from the plant. But I was also the creative director on Volvo for 10 years. I mean, I understand the car business. And what works really well in car manufacturing, there's 2 sides I think are really, really critical. Where they make their money is the assembly line. So they make their money on the assembly line because everybody knows exactly what to do. They know when to do it. It's repeatable behavior over and over and over and over and over again. And all the inefficiency has been stripped out over time. It is the most efficient way to make a car. And you can also guarantee cost and margins and everything at the other end. And quality, by the way. Repeatable behavior means you guarantee quality. That's where they make their money. But if they only did assembly line work, they'd go out of business because at some point they'd go, what do you mean people are buying electric vehicles? What happened? We were busy with our head down, So what they do is they develop what are called concept cars. And concept cars are built off the assembly line. It doesn't mess with the assembly line. So it's off the assembly line. It's a small group of people. It's a little more entrepreneurial. Um, they, um, they go at a smaller problem, and they actually have no expectation that thing is ever going to go into production. But when they do it, they look and they go, "Oh, you know what? Look at this gas cap. This this could work really well. We could take this," and they move it onto the assembly line. And so what happens is the assembly line innovates in a really responsible way over time. The problem with a lot of individuals like us, Mo, who read a lot and consume a lot, we get a ton of great ideas from people. If you're listening, when you go to a conference, you walk away with 4 million different things, and your gut reaction is, I want to do all of them. And what you end up doing is you end up applying that concept car thinking to the assembly line. That's chaos. Because now you've lost all efficiency, you've lost all expertise, it's not repeatable behavior, your costs go up, and guess what? Your morale sinks. And you end up sitting there going like, well, we should have just done what we did last year. So you really need to look at your day about those two things. Identify parts of your day. Is this assembly line? Because if it is, the line we use in my business is you kill it and bill it. Get it out the door. You know how to do this. You've done it for a million times. Go, get it out. Now, the concept car stuff, let's take some time with that. Let's not expect this to solve all of our problems. Let's just do it to do it and see what we learn. So, as a quick example, the book before you, I wrote that book, but I did not publish that book. This was published by Page Two. But there was a point when I went to my partners at Church and State and said, we should publish a book. We should become a publisher. We can do this. And so I took it on as a concept car. I got the perfect book. It was friends who were in comedy. They had a comedy radio show. And I said, we're going to publish your book, and I'm going to figure out how to do it. I used freelancers only. I did not disrupt the workflow of the agency. It was me, one other person from the agency, and a bunch of freelancers. We did it. We published this book. It was phenomenally successful. It was best-selling humor book in the country for like 14 weeks in a row. It won international awards on independent publishing, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, we realized this is not, what did we learn? We have nothing else to gain in the organization to publish a comedy book. If we're going to do it, let's focus on what we do really well. Let's write business content and have somebody else publish it and worry about that. We would not have got there if we hadn't failed in some ways at this other publishing venture.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then you didn't bet the whole organization on that to publish that book. You did it. It was successful in its own right, but you learned it just wasn't, it didn't leverage, it wasn't aligned with all the other good stuff you're doing, things like that.
Yep.
So how do you do this? Let's do one more Q&A on this exact topic because I think it's interesting. I love the idea, but folks, there's more detail in the book on this exact idea of assembly line versus concept car. I really liked it, Ron. So now let's dig down into the day-to-day activities of a professional. 1 foot in delivery, 1 foot in business development.
Yeah.
What's your advice on how they should juggle this? Maybe you have advice around percentage of time. Maybe you have advice around what stage they are in their career, how they work with their teams. How should they identify how much time they should spend on concept car and how much time they should spend on assembly line?
Well, the first thing is that you need to carve out time for the concept car, because that other stuff, it's always going to be a higher priority. The short-term reactionary stuff, it's always going to be a higher priority. And it's kind of like exercise, like if you don't make time for exercise, and I don't make enough time, but if you don't, there's always something more important to do. There's always something more important. Unless you go, no, this is a priority over the long haul, so I'm going to carve out the time to do it. So whether that's, I carve it out in my calendar, like I block book stuff, and to ensure that I spend time on concept car thinking. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I ensure that there are proper metrics in place. Like, how am I going to evaluate the success of this thing? And then I I kind of sell it internally. And even though I'm the founder of the organization, I still need to get people on side. And then I do it. Like I ensure that I do it. I don't do it half-assed. I put the greatest amount of effort into doing it so that, because if I don't, then it's always going to be like the excuse. Well, that didn't work because we didn't give it enough, but we didn't put enough investment in it. We didn't put the right resources. Don't give yourself excuses later on. Deal with those excuses now by doing a great job of it and go all in on it. And then the last part is I only have one concept car activity ever going on. I don't have more than one. I just can't.
And you do that, Ron, just that also makes you prioritize, right? To make you
It totally
focus on that
does.
exact thing. And because I don't know about you, but I have the tendency, man, I am such a fast starter. I'll start 50 things at once
Yeah,
and I don't make meaningful progress on any of them. And I really have to
exactly.
force myself to say, no, no, just one big thing at a time, or three a quarter sometimes will do. Yep.
Because the other stuff is going to take up 80% of your day. It's going to. You
Yeah.
just know it
Yeah.
is. If you're delivering stuff, it's going to.
So when we think about business development, we can put a bow on this episode with this is the concept car kind of things you can do. And I'll start us off, and Ron, and then you riff with me, and
Sure.
this will be we'll get really practical here. That if I think of business development as a process, it's how do I prioritize who I want to meet? How do I use some kind of value to get in front of them? How do I deepen relationships? How do I create demand with the IP, with the big brain that I've got with me and my team? How can I do classic things to actually get deals signed, overcoming objections, talking about money? How do I win the business and grow it from there, being proactive and helpful and things like that? So concept car stuff, you could sort of look at I know it's pipeline or funnel kind of
Yeah.
ideas, but we could also look at them as skills. We could do concept car on any one of those things. Maybe it's
100%.
yeah, so for lead gen, it might be, hey, I was flying to conference and speaking. That's not going to work because there's a pandemic. Maybe I should try digital content. In with creating demand, we've got our model that we call the give to get model. Maybe there's concept car things we can do around that, like who do we offer it to? What does it do? How big is it? What do we have an analysis on the front end? Do we just do a brainstorming session? So what are back to you? What are other concept car kind of ideas people can use around business development? And then we'll wrap this episode up.
I think the one that I'll often use is what are the problems that emerge that are, especially when you're in a weird cycle like we're in right now, right? That when there's been such a fundamental change in the dynamic, that is going to create new problems, and new problems create a power vacuum of people who are rushing to solve those problems. And when you look at disruption, disruption is really just, they're just the key disruptors are the ones who are solving the problems the establishment can't or won't. That's it. They've identified a problem, financial, emotional, rational, functional, whatever, that nobody is solving, and they rush to solve it. So that's where I try and start. Like, what problem exists out there that nobody is solving right now, and can we do that? And like, what's the best way to solve that? So there was we developed a concept. I developed a concept car activity, a division of the agency called Unison that works solely on personal brands. And so when I looked at the problem of personal branding, I said everybody's talking about personal branding, but no one's doing it. No one's designing stuff. No one is creating a strategy for for a personal brand. But we do that for big brands. So what if we made an express version of what we already do for professionals and for speakers and for Olympic athletes and for politicians and business leaders? Well, okay, the problem that exists if we do that is they can't spend 100 grand to do it. Okay, so how do we do it in an express way so that we can still make money and that it's more, appetizing for an individual? So we came up with a new product approach that leverages what we already do at a reduced fee. It's $25,000 with very specific timelines, with very specific outputs. And that's a whole new division of the agency. And it all came out of just like, what's the problem? What's going on these days? And then I did it 3 times using freelance resources outside of the assembly line We tested it out. We changed the outputs. And then eventually it was like, okay, this is going on the assembly line.
I love it. And it was called Unison. Is that what you
It's
said?
called Unison Personal Brand Design.
Unison.
And we don't even have, it's not even on the website or anything right yet. We just finished one 2 weeks ago. And it's an organic thing, and we'll get there on the promotion of it, but we've just been busy building the product.
I love it. So then what you'll do, I assume, is once you like publicly launch, you'll think of, well, you'll do think, do, say around that entity within church and state, and then you'll figure out what do we really, or you probably already have, but
Yeah.
that say part of it, I'm going to be watching from the sidelines to figure out how do you get the word out, what do you do that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
really cool, Ron. And I think
Yeah.
that story is really it's really meaningful. I think that what's interesting about that product, if you will, that service, is that our whole audience can relate to it. They might need it. So I think it's a great story. Well, perfect. Well, Ron, man, thanks for being on the show. This has been so fun. Where should people go to learn more about Church and State or Ron Tite or your new
Unison.
personal brand design? Yeah, Unison.
Yeah, you can go to churchstate.com or rontate.com. Yeah, both available.
I love it. I love it. And folks, Think Do Say, fantastic book. Really loved it. It's a read that you get through fast, Ron. I'm sure this was your
Yeah.
point with it, but you get through it fast. You laugh a little bit, and when you close that final page, you're like, I learned a few things. Like
Yeah.
it's got that magic trifecta, if you will.
Well, thanks, Bo. Thanks for having me on. And thanks to everybody for listening.
I love it. Thanks, Ron. Bye.
See ya.
Hey, everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. And I'm doing the recap episode right now on all that I learned from chatting with Ron Tite in the prior 4 episodes. So I'm gonna pull together what I learned and I'm gonna apply it to business development. And I'm gonna be pretty transparent on this. A couple of these, or the last 2 things I'll give you, I'm gonna share 3. The first one's sort of obvious, but the last 2, I don't think you would expect. And they're what I personally learned. So I think you're going to enjoy this one. It's a little different. I'm not going to rehash some of the things that Ron said. I'd never do that. But this is going to go in a totally different direction. So before I get into the big 3 things, know that if you want our best thinking on business development and a place where I launch all of our new complimentary things, live events, training courses, everything else that doesn't cost at all you have to do to get that is go to growbigplaybook.com, sign up, takes 20 seconds, and then that's where I'm going to let you know. You'll sign up for an email list, and I'll let you know when these kind of things happen. So that's at growbigplaybook.com. You got to go there to get the good stuff, is what I'm saying. All right. So you already know our perspective. I and my teams have trained over 15,000, almost 20,000 high-end experts, professionals all over the world, the kind of people that have 1 foot in delivery and 1 foot in business development. And with that perspective, and also from the perspective of riding the snowball system and launching that and getting all the reader feedback, these are the 3 things that I think was particularly interesting in my interview with Ron. He gave us the sort of live version of several things there in Think, Do, Say, but he gave a bunch of other things that you just can't pick up from reading a book. So these are the big 3 things I learned from Ron. Thing 1, I really like the Think, Do, Say framework. What it does is, and I'll just apply it to a professional's personal brand, if this makes sense. Think, that's like, what do you really believe in? What are you really for? What's your what's the sort of the big thing that you'll be doing until you're hopefully 75, 80 years old with a cane because you believe in it so much? Okay, maybe you don't want to work that long. I actually do. I love working. I absolutely love working, and I can never imagine a day where I'm completely retired. I might work less as I get older in my career, but I actually just love work. So the answer for me is like, what I would want to answer is, what do I believe so deeply that I want to pull this through the rest of my working life? That's think. Do is sort of how do you exemplify that? And the way Ron said it that I thought was so powerful was that the people don't judge you by the things you say. We're going to get to the say part of Think, Do, Say in a second, but they really judge you by what you do. I cannot tell you how many people have read Snowball System or heard about our trainings, and then we caught up later for some specific reason. And I tried to do something that was really giving first. Or actually, here's the story. I was with my daughter. This is probably the best moment I can exemplify or tell this. I was with my daughter, and this is Gabby, and she had interned for us for a year. Yeah, I think it was before her sophomore year in college. And she worked for us the whole summer. She managed the marketing and the launch of the Snowball system and did all kinds of studying, wrote the copy for emails, set up events. It was really cool. She did some really meaningful work. And in amongst that story or that summer, I just grabbed her, and we went to a couple meetings together. And we got out of one meeting, and so many things happened in that meeting that are just like right down the middle of our model, like ask questions, learn the priorities of the other side, figure out how you can be helpful, whether that includes things they could purchase from you or not. Talking about your rates and not bending on them, all kinds of things. Well, all those are specific things that happened in that actual meeting. And we got out, and I said, "Hey, Gabby, what'd you think?" She's like, I can't believe it. That was like the whole snowball system brought to life in one meeting. You did this and that, and they said this, and you did that, and all that. And she was almost glowing that we exemplified the things that we teach others. And I'll never forget it. We're in the elevator going down to the car because the meeting happened to be in Atlanta where we live. And, and she was just beaming that what we do is aligned with what we say we do. And boy, it struck me in that moment how powerful actions are, because that's what you're really signaling you're about. So back to Ron's framework, the think part is defining what you're really for. What do you really what's your brand belief, what he talks about. And then the doing is how do we actually create that in action? And then the say is how do we just tell everybody we can about it in a memorable, meaningful way? I'm using my words, not Ron's, but that's sort of like the amplification of the marketing or the getting the word out part. And one of the things I really like about the Think, Do, Say framework is a lot of times people jump straight to the say. What are we going to tell the market? What are we going to do? What's our advertising campaign? How are we going to do lead generation if I'm a professional in professional services, things like that? How am I going to meet new people? Well, that's the say part, but I really like how Ron forces us to do the think, who are we really for? The do, how do we exemplify it before the say? And I really liked his three-part framework with that. So that's thing one. The three-part framework is thing one of my recap. Here's the second thing, authenticity. I really liked Ron's definition. Be comfortable with your imperfections. Be comfortable with your imperfections. I've heard the word authentic or be authentic or things like that so much in the last couple of months that it's hard to. I believe it and I know it's true, but I was having a trouble almost defining it because I hear it all the time, and I even talk about it when I say we're teaching you to be authentic in our classes, but I had never thought of. I knew what it was, but I hadn't put a fine point onto the definition the way Ron did, and I really like that. So this was something I didn't expect to get because I didn't anticipate it. But be comfortable with your imperfections. That's a really cool way of thinking about authenticity. And as I think when we're comfortable, meaning when we don't feel pressure, that's when we have a higher likelihood of asking dumb questions or saying, "Hey, this might be obvious." And one thing I noticed here is, or you know what, I just learned this thing and I just want to share it with you. It's the idea of asking what others could think are dumb questions, the going back to the basics, sharing our journey, sharing that we're still learning. It's the act of doing those kind of things that really signals, I think, authenticity. And I don't know about you, but when somebody does those things with me, when they effectively, because they're focused more on the process or progress than result, if you will, when people are focused more on say making progress, that's when they're able to share more often that They're not perfect now, right? Because none of us are. And I want to be around people like that. So this idea that authenticity is important is huge, A, and B, Ron's definition was meaningful to me in the sense that now that we can articulate it, it's being comfortable with our imperfections. That's something I can do even more often. So I really like that. That's the second thing that I really loved out of what I learned from Ron. The third thing, and you probably won't have seen this coming because he didn't talk about it at all. Ron never mentioned this one time as advice, at least. I want to try to be funnier. I really liked talking with Ron. When he shared he was a stand-up comic for 20 years, it just clicked because his book is funny. He has little one-liners. There's just funny elements to it throughout that keeps you reading. I really like that. And if you go back and watch these 4 episodes with Ron, some of the even things he does, you can see obviously as a stand-up comedian, but if you don't know that, you're just like, I like being around this person. Like Ron has a voice. I don't know if you notice the Ron voice, but when he's going to be funny, he sort of twists his head a little bit and he articulates in a little different way. And that sort of says, hey, this is my funny, making fun of something voice. And then he comes back to the real Ron voice. You know how great comedians have a voice that they keep going back to. They can pull through their routine. And that's the I'm now playing actor as opposed to comic voice. And Ron has that. And I think I need to figure out my version of that because I I think when he would lean in, he would pause and he would say that in a sort of funny voice to signal I'm being funny now. And he was being funny then. That he was funny. That I think that's just really good. One of the things that we do in all of our meetings, we try really hard across our whole team is to make people laugh. We try so darn hard to be a good entertainer, even as we're doing very seemingly mundane routine things, planning for the sessions, picking the dates, things like that. As we roll out at scale at our big clients, we roll out our business development training. Even when we're doing that, we are trying to laugh. We're trying to laugh in the beginning. We're trying to intersperse laughter throughout. We're trying to laugh and have a smile at the end. Ron and I talked about some ways to do that in the prior episodes. And and we try to do that in our training classes too. One of our mantras when somebody goes through certification to be able to teach our classes, be a great entertainer, be a great host. Don't be so subject matter expertise that or ish that you're so focused on the content that you're boring. Our content has the science and steps all the way throughout, 150 plus, 60 plus, whatever it is, peer-reviewed scientific studies that are the basis of everything we teach. That stuff's the meat. That's the technical stuff. That stuff almost teaches itself. You just have to be able to describe a experimental group and a control group and what people learn and things like that. Our folks you can read that and memorize it if you work hard enough. What takes even more work, though, is to be a great entertainer. So as I think about the times in life where we accomplished the most and we had the most fun, it was when we were having fun, when we were being funny, when we were telling a joke in the prep meeting, when we were only there to pick dates, basic boring stuff, right? Or it's when we were a great entertainer, a great host, or a great comedian in the training session. I think what I realized talking with Ron is I want to dial that up even more. I don't remember the researchers, but I remember the study where somebody was teaching negotiation, and they found that if you told a joke at the beginning of a negotiation, it actually reached a better result for everybody involved, and people rated the negotiation better. And if I remember right, the joke was like about a frog, and it wasn't very good at all. Like it wasn't even a good joke. But even it's almost as if even the attempt at humor helps grease the skids for more productivity and more happiness and more satisfaction. So, with all that said, I am committing to you to be funnier and to have more fun in everything in life. I mean, why not, right? That's why we're here. So, let me close with this because it's a bad joke. It's so bad. It's just so bad. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? The answer? And thank you, by the way, to Bradley, one of my colleagues, for telling me this joke, because this is Bradley's joke, not mine. The answer to how many psychologists it takes to change a light bulb is 1. But the light bulb has to want to change. There you go, folks. I'm setting the bar low. There's no doubt I can be funnier than that. So I'll leave you with that. Hope you enjoy the show, and we'll see you next time.